He was one of the first ones that was shot. Crossing the Medicine Tail Coulee.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is the officers, at least 5 of them that was there, were wearing buckskins like Custer. And there was a couple, like Yates, he had yellow hair like Custer too, so they're thinking it could have been Yates.
You had Tom, who was
Tom Custer, Yates. So you got like 3 different individuals there that could have been mistaken for Custer, so we'll never really know. A lot of the Native Americans there in that camp, they never saw Custer before. They couldn't tell him.
You have to remember he had two wounds, one in the left breast and one in the temple. And a lot of the people, the scholars that say that he was shot coming across the river, theoretically he could have taken a chest wound that kept him, he wasn't completely dead, and they helped keep him in the saddle trying to get him away, and then got him up to Last Stand Hill, and when things were looking the way they were looking, they decided to put somebody else decided to put that second round in his head. These warriors had, what went on in their mind?
On the morning of June 25th, 1876, my great-great-grandfather, Ten Bears of the Lakota Nation, was right here on the banks of the Little Bighorn River. And just over this hill rise was General George Armstrong Custer, leading the 7th Cavalry into what would be known as the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or Custer's Last Stand. But in Native tradition, this fight is referred to as the Battle of the Greasy Grass. Well, the prairie grass fed the buffalo, and the buffalo fed us. We rely on the buffalo for virtually everything: food, clothing, and shelter. Basically, when the white people, the Europeans, came west, they brought their trains and their railroad tracks, snaking ominously across our lands. The white people were shooting the buffalo for sport from the trains and for the price of their tongues. So it was a major, major encroachment upon our land, and had a dramatic effect on our food source. And as Plains people, we're a nomadic people. We follow the buffalo because we're a buffalo culture. So this basically started off the Plains Indian campaigns against driving us off of our land, and resulting in the establishment of the Treaty of 1868, which had promised our Lakota people Spotivary and the Black Hills of South Dakota, which, as the treaty read, would be forever free of white men. This belonged to the Lakota people, to our people. And it wasn't until sometime after that that Custer announced that there was gold discovered in the Black Hills. And it went back to the east, and we had people, miners, swarming into the Black Hills from all directions, which in essence was in breach of the treaty. So the only way that we could really deal with that is we were killing off the white men that were coming into our territory. And then sometime shortly after that, General Custer, long hair, and his soldiers came into the Black Hills and came after us for killing off the miners. So we had miners and people from all over swarming into the Black Hills to pan for gold. And really, the only way that we could address this concern for us was through annihilation, which was a new tactic that was actually utilized by Crazy Horse. We had to change our methods in terms of addressing these concerns. So we were killing off the miners that were coming in for gold because they had broken the treaty. And then the 7th Cavalry and Pa'aska, which is long hair, it's what we call General George Armstrong Custer, went in to protect the miners that were panning for gold from being slaughtered by us. And again, we looked at this as it's broken words. They established a treaty, and these lands are sacred to us. These are where all of our origin stories come from. So it was a situation that we had to take care of it right away. Otherwise, things would get out of hand. And under the current circumstances and the way things had happened, things are leading up to the inevitable with Custer. Where I'm presently standing, it's called the Battle of the Rosebud. And leaving the reservation, we would be considered hostile, which meant that the government would come in and shoot men, women, and children on sight. And we knew this, but this was the only way to, live our traditional lifestyle. The Army sent General Crook and 1,000 some odd soldiers and 100 and some odd Crow warriors right here into the Rosebud Valley in pursuit of us. Well, General Crook, they came from beyond that tree line down there and dog-legged around right here to this point in the valley. Crazy Horse and our Lakota people and some northern Tacistas came down from the north, these hills over here behind me, into this area and attacked. It was June 17th, 1876 at about 8:30 in the morning. Now, my family history indicates that there were more white casualties than white historians depict. But whatever the case, this is what actually set the stage for the Little Bighorn battle. General Crook had no appetite to chase Crazy Horse after this was over. He retreated with his wounded, and our people left frustrated back into the Little Bighorn Valley. Just to give you an idea of how big this village was, we're going to be traveling at 60 miles an hour, approximately 3 miles down the freeway here, and we will still just be cresting the outer edge of the end of the village, but we'll still be in the village. So that'll give you some idea of the significance of the size of this village. This is something that was very rare. I mean, this was, again, it was the largest village that has ever been recorded and passed down through our oral tradition. So this is something that's huge. Custer was completely unprepared and overwhelmed at the size of this village. The average size of a Lakota village back then was maybe 52 teepees. And you see like the houses, where the house is and where the cows are, and these telephone poles. This was all barren. This is all village, all the way up to this road. And you can almost depict where the teepees were and the different villages and the circles. All the teepees were facing east to welcome the rising sun. We were here basically so that we could come together and go on a huge buffalo hunt and maintain our traditional way of life instead of going to the reservation. And Crazy Horse had gone from reservation to reservation to pull people that wanted to get back to our traditional way of doing things. So people were leaving the reservation, all coming together here. And at the head of the village was the Northern Cheyenne, or Tacistas, or Northern Cheyenne. And Sitting Bull gave them special privilege to camp at the head of the village because they were allies of ours. And like right here, beginning of the tree line, starts the Northern Tacistas village, the Northern Tacistas Circle, which had over 200 teepees from down to the Little Bighorn River all the way up here to this side of the freeway. And as we go down the valley, you've got the other bands start to form. More inland, almost to where we are at this point in time, was the start of the Ogallala Circle, which had well over 260 teepees. My family was actually in the Ogallala Circle, so my ancestors were right here, right at this point, on June 25th, 1876. And you have, because there were 7 bands of ours altogether, the Sihosapas, and the Uhenhepas, and the Sinkagnus, and the Menekooju, and the Unkpapas. And the Unkpapa village is actually, which we'll be cresting 3 miles down the road here, had well over 300 teepees, all of about 18 feet high on average. So talking about a huge area of space. So when the 7th and Longhair came down, he was completely overwhelmed. He wound up in the middle of the village instead of the end of the village. And the overall philosophy at that time was to reach the women and children for containment so that we would stop fighting and we would give up. But just the immense size and the number of people completely overwhelmed him. He was completely unprepared. So you can imagine just the numbers, and you see in the distance the bluffs that overlook the Little Bighorn Valley. That's where Custer and his men were. In fact, out there, you can see on the back horizon the crow's nest. And that's where Custer's scouts first saw our pony herds. Over behind you, behind this road, were all of our pony herds. And we're talking hundreds, even thousands of head of horses. And he flat out disregarded the warnings from his own scouts of the actual size of the village, because his scouts knew. His scouts said that our ponies dotted the western horizon, looked like worms in the grass. There were so many of us. It was almost like a premonition. And we're currently at about 60 miles an hour driving down to the Gary Owen, which is where they had the Reno defense line and where they first came into the village, and we're still in the village. So all this time, you know, that we've been talking here and going down, you see the cows and the houses on the left-hand side. This was all the village, all the way down to the tree line down there, down by the river. Sometime before the Great Battle of the Greasy Grass, Sitting Bull went up to the Deer Medicine Rock high above the Little Bighorn Valley and prayed for our people. During this ceremony, he had a vision. This vision was of white soldiers falling into our camp, head first, upside down. This vision was interpreted that the soldiers would come into our camp and that we would fight them and that we would also be victorious. On the day of June 24th, several of our warriors came across some hardtack that had either been left or disregarded by the military because it was too heavy to carry or because they just couldn't take it. As our scouts were rummaging through the hardtack, suddenly the detachment of soldiers showed up to pick up what they left behind. They suddenly turned around and retreated back to General Custer to let them know that, well, they'd been spotted. Our warriors returned to our village with the hardtack and let them know that the soldiers were in the area. When the fighting started, the alert sounded through the village. All of the young men and the warriors ran back to their teepees to gather their weapons and to paint their bodies. They paint their bodies with their own personal medicine that was brought to life for them through visions or the path that they walked. They belong to a warrior society. The belief is that by utilizing your medicine and sticking to your visions and going into battle, that it would carry you through. And by doing so, you would come through victorious and unharmed.
Yeah, there's several last stands. The first last stand was by Cemetery Ridge, there where the cemetery's at.
Yeah, right.
And he was pushed back up to on the bluffs where he made his last stand and got wiped out.
No, I think
but
they're even talking further north.
That's what they're saying. They're trying to say that he was trying to push to get as far as north he could to cut off the women in children. Because if he could do that, the wars
Because they were down in the lower end.
It was a
They
great
had moved
strategy.
the women and children down to the lower end.
It backfired on him.
That's exactly what he's going to do.
The timing was off. You know.
But the way I understand it is that, you know, right where Dave said he was wounded right after he crossed Medicine Coulee.